All right, good afternoon. Thank you to everybody for joining us today for a CTL workshop. This is our first substantive workshop of the year, and we are excited to have Dr. Dawn Drake, geography professor. Geography is now housed in the biology program. And she's offering today an interdisciplinary talk about the importance of geography, how it relates to our disciplines, and how we and our students can use it to better market um, uh, their educations and their skills in the open employment marketplace. So, Dr. Drake, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and that's not the screen we want.
Oh, you have Zoom, do you?
Yes. Let's try that again. There we go. All right. So thank you, Dr. DeBrincat, for introducing me. As I said, he said I am Dr. Dawn Drake. I'm Associate Professor of Geography in the Biology Department. I am the main professor. I teach the courses in geography here, although I am not the only person who does research and work in geography here on campus. Of numerous other faculty members who use geography every day. What I'm really hoping to do today is, this is not about me saying your students all need to take my classes or trying to increase my numbers. This is about me saying, what can we do? How can my skill set and the things that geography brings to the table make Missouri Western's graduates more competitive? What are the things I've observed in talking to my partners in internships and in the workforce and talking to my students that you can take to your students, things that you might not have been aware of, that will make them more competitive in their graduate programs and in their job searches. And really what it's about is dispelling some rumors, although many of the people who are live now do know already what geography is and isn't, and have heard me say this before. But for the average person on the street, the notion of what geography is very narrow. It's not wrong, but it's very narrow, and it misses some of the very powerful things that geography brings to the table. And it's not anyone's fault that they have this narrow view of what geography is. It's not our students' fault when they come here that they think they know what geography is and they don't want to engage in it. For those of you that I'm talking to who had a K-12 education in the United States, you had the same experience probably that the students did. Yours was for a very different reason. In their cases, it's because they went to school in an era where state standards were very emphasized, that a specific skill set was taught to the test, and many times those social studies skills are being removed from the test and stripped from the state standards. And so the students get a very narrow focus of what geography is, and they don't actually learn about the potential of geography. So to ask that question then, what is geography? And as I say that, I say this is not a unique experience. And I said that all of us who didn't go to school K-12 in an era of standards and standardized tests at the state level still had this experience. It is incredibly rare for a student to come to university saying, I want to be a geographer, or I want to major in geography. I know kids who ultimately do that, who are geography professors' kids, who said, I'm not majoring in geography when they got to college. And it's because we had the same high school experience of geography. It was very narrowly focused. So I had an amazing middle school and high school geography teacher. She taught it as if it was a college course. She actually did teach us what geography was. She took us to Norway and Iceland when I was in high school. And so if there was somebody that was going to major in geography, it probably was me. But I got that intent to declare my major form from Indiana University of Pennsylvania. I knew I wanted to be a social studies ed major, and at IUP you could concentrate in history, in geography, in economics, or in sociology and anthropology. And I so wanted to check that geography box, and I had the quintessential experience. I said to myself, I can't draw a map. I can't be a geography major. History. And off I went. And then I found out how much more it could be and ended up with a dual concentration by the time I graduated and went on to grad school in geography. I want to help the students embrace the power of geography and experience it for all it's worth. So National Geographic defines geography as the study of places and their relationship between people and their environments. That's not wrong. The word geography comes from the Greek geo, earth, graphy for writing about the earth. And that's exactly what we're doing as geographers. We're looking at the where question, the places on the map, and understanding their relationship between people and their environments. Dr. Taylor's harassing me in the chat. But that's a very surface understanding of what geography is. Geography is so broad-based, and it allows us to touch on so many different disciplines. One of the true powers of geography is its interdisciplinary nature, and that we reach across so many different disciplines. And I'll talk more about that. Before I talk more about the power of geography, though, I want to dispel those rumors that some of you have, not through your own fault, and that your students are going to have about what geography is or is not. And so geography is not memorizing places on a map. Every one of you is going to have, maybe you've had this experience, or you're going to have a student in your office as you're advising say, I don't want to have to memorize where every city in Europe is. I might make them memorize where a couple of them are, and there's very good pedagogical reasons for that, but it is not memorizing places on a map and being able to spit that information out. It is not just drawing maps. It's part of it. It's one of the ability to make maps with computers is one of the very powerful skills that geography provides, but it's not the only skill. And if you can't draw, you're fine. It's also not just being able to spit back the differences between and the names of different types of land features and forms. I do some of that in my physical geography class. A very small percentage of it is that, but this is not what it is. Yet this is what students think it is, because that was what their middle school and high school geography experience was like, if they had geography at all at that period of time. So geography is, and as I included in the title, the science of where. And I will be perfectly honest when I say that this is so very obvious to say we're the science of where, and yet we've only latched on to this in the last 5 years to actually coin this phrase and use it a lot. When I say that geography is interdisciplinary, basically we look at problems that all of the disciplines on this call, on this video chat look at. We just look at it in a different way. We look at it from the frame of where. And so that gives us, one of the things I always tell my students is when they come to me and say, well, what can I study? And I say, what are you interested in? Can you put that on a map? Is there some way that the map's going to appear in your paper? Okay, then it's geography. And that gives us tremendous leeway to do the things that we want and study the things that we're interested in. But also sometimes it feels like we're stomping on other people's disciplines, and that's not at all what we want to do. It's a very different lens. Geography is interdisciplinary in that it crosses barriers, in that it is a physical science, it is a social science, it is also a humanity. So depending on the course I'm teaching, I cover a broad base of skills there, but always looking from that lens of where. So both my master's degree and my PhD, the programs I came from were very strong in the climate change sciences. And so we had faculty and students in the department who were looking at different indicators for climate change. My advisor in my master's program used cores of ice from Antarctica looking for pollen and air bubbles. My colleague friends in the department at Tennessee were using tree rings, and were using lake sediment cores and other types of things to do those same things. While I was at the University of Tennessee, one of our professors was tasked to, in a legal case, to prove that the violin that was on display in a museum in Britain was in fact a Stradivari violin. And he did that by looking at the tree rings and dating the age of the wood in the violin to prove that the wood came from the period when Stradivari would have been making his violins. And so there are all these different things. I am trained as an economic and business geographer. And so I look at similar problems that economists or business faculty would look at, but whereas they might assume that the model they're looking at can occur anywhere and the location doesn't matter, I say that the location very much matters. And so that's where this science of where comes from. Geographers solve problems. Well, all of you can say your discipline solves problems. I don't own that space at all. This is a space, though, that I think geography in the last year and the problems the globe has faced in the last year, geography has come to the forefront. So we've seen articles like these appearing more and more, and not just in Forbes, but in other places, and how because of our globally interconnected world, how so many problems that the world faces are geographic problems, or problems that the lens of geography can help with. And so a big one, many of you have seen, interacted with this, either the Johns Hopkins version of this dashboard or some variation on the theme for state or local resources. Many of you probably don't realize this started last year in January and February when Johns Hopkins got ready to deploy this. This was actually a geography student's master's thesis that was sitting on an advisor's desk, and it was pivoted to map coronavirus instead of the disease that they were mapping at the time. And now all of us are familiar with using one of these dashboards. In fact, right at the moment, all of us could build one of these dashboards because the company that makes the software has made it free to the world to help us track and understand COVID-19 and do distribution of resources for COVID-19. So I wouldn't pretend to be an expert in anybody's professional organizations. But my observations from the disciplines that I have worked with in their professional organizations is that the professional organizations tend to focus on the academic and the professionals in that discipline and how they help them in terms of providing training, providing publication opportunities, presentation opportunities, networking. And the American Association of Geographers, which is the largest of the professional organizations for geographers in the US and probably one of the largest in the world, does all of that. But we also have an extensive policy arm. Probably about half of the people who work in the offices in Washington, D.C., which our offices are on Capitol Hill, are policy people, and we have full-time lobbyists, because so many of these global problems and policy issues for the US are geographic questions, or are better understood with a geographic lens. So climate change, immigration, food security, logistics, which right at the moment is about PPE and vaccine distribution. All of those things are things that geographers tackle on a daily basis and projects that geographers work on a daily basis. So that's kind of a broad overview to what geography brings to the table, what it's not. What I'm advocating for, what I want to make aware to the audience is the types of skills that geography classwork provides. And some of these are very much the skills that all of us provide in our coursework, and written and oral communication. Many of us work with math skills, interdisciplinary thinking. Geographers almost always have to think interdisciplinarily. Especially as academic geographers, it's a luxury outside of the R1s to be in a geography department and not be in what we call ampersand departments, whether that's political science and geography, or history and geography, or me being in the biology department now. So we are trained from the beginning how to think interdisciplinarily and be part of a larger department. But that's a skill that transfers across, and students who can think that way and come into their careers thinking across disciplines and knowing how to reach across tables, that's an incredibly powerful skill. In an increasingly globally and interconnected world, most of our students are going to have to negotiate multiple cultures. and be aware of the interconnected world around them. They're not going to have the luxury of assuming that their company, whatever, is the center of the world. And geography classes really focus on cultural competencies and how to be a bigger global citizen and understand how we're impacted and we impact the world around us. Spatial literacy, spatial interpretation, and spatial reasoning skills are all variations on a similar theme. These are key terms that geographers use that you'll never get an employer to articulate in this particular way, but they desperately want. And in sometimes even know to look for a geography course or ask the student, the potential job candidate, did you have a geography course? So spatial literacy is kind of the basic understanding the space around you and being able to appreciate the space around you, whether that's physical space or it's your place in the world. Spatial interpretation is a very different skill, one that I think that a lot of us want to think is very simple. It's the look out the plane window and understand what you see under you skill, right? I've learned as I increasingly add spatial interpretation to my coursework that it's not always, it's one of those skills sometimes that's either you have it or you're going to work hard to interpret it, that looking at the world below you doesn't always make sense. And then just because you can make sense of, I'm looking at mountains or I'm looking at a field, doesn't mean you can turn that into the why. Why does it look like that? What does that mean? And then the big ticket item that employers are often looking for is spatial reasoning skills. That not just I'm aware of the space around me, but I can reason the space. And this is often also why employers like people who can play chess or other games where you're thinking 3 moves ahead. Spatial reasoning skills often mean that geographers often can not only envision the space around them and their mental map, but what happens if somebody moves a piece of that mental map or something changes in that mental map. And those spatial reasoning skills, because they translate nicely into a lot of other types of critical thinking skills, are often things that employers are looking for. And then the last group that all kind of dovetail together and come through the map making work, data collection, data management, data analysis, spatial statistical analysis, and then data display, turning that into a map. I love that big data is a buzzword that we want to use all the time, and machine learning. This is going to sound arrogant, and I don't mean it to sound arrogant, but geographers have been doing big data since we did big data back when you didn't have a computer to do big data with. My master's thesis had 250,000 individual data points in it. So we were doing big data before. This is an area where my students get employed. I have students who work in data management. So one of my very first students to graduate from here, she applied for a job at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City doing records analysis and records management for them. And she leveraged her data management skills that she gained in GIS. She is now the director of the federal employee program for Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Kansas City. Another one, her main job in life, she's basically a forensic accountant. She looks for the money that Smith Barney loses every month, but it's not enough money for them to actually care about. But she doesn't have training in forensic accounting. She uses her data management skills from GIS to do that. And then my third, I'll brag on her a little bit because I just found out yesterday that she has gotten her 4th promotion in 6 months because of her data management skills. And she just has massively overhauled and changed the way that the Springfield Public Schools in Springfield, Missouri manage their data and process and analyze their data. So these are a lot of the skills that we bring to the forefront and that we offer to students. So then the question becomes, well, who's going to hire these students? And what I have found myself saying more and more in the last year is nobody hires for a job called geographer anymore. Well, the federal government still does. The federal government still has a job called geographer, and it actually has to do with the fact that it's an actual pay scale classification that they have that job. But this list comes from the American Association of Geographers website. This is a select set of, if we were going to tell students what buzzwords to look for on Indeed or something, these are some of the things with a geography major you might be looking for. A lot of it is science, data scientist, data technician, using geospatial, geoscience, precision ag technicians, remote sensing, cartographers, planners. This set is a tiny subset of the keywords we would give students. The keyword set that the AAG puts on its jobs and geography page is about 145 keywords. This set is the ones who job growth is at minimum 5% faster than US average for job growth. These are jobs that have been growing steadily. So jobs in geography, these types of jobs routinely make the top of lists of best careers for things like US News and World Report. They also are routinely among the fastest growing occupations according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. But our students are not necessarily looking for these types of jobs. Your students are not looking for these types of jobs. They're looking for jobs in your programs. So let's talk about the companies that prefer job candidates who have geospatial training. And what I'll tell you about this is that prefer word is being generous. Increasingly, some of these disciplines, it's not a prefer, it's a, you're not getting this job if you don't have it. We see that with, in the middle of the list there, the wildlife biology and ecology. Our wildlife conservation majors are not going to get jobs anymore if they haven't taken Carrie Chevalier's GPS course and taken my GIS course. They're just simply not competitive. Law enforcement, emergency management, both of those things, they do dispatching and also analysis using mapping. And increasingly, they don't want to have to teach the police officer or the firefighter how to use that software. They want them to be able to figure it out when they come in. And one of my former students, her husband was a police officer down in Kansas City. And he went to work his very first day, and his training officer handed him the laptop and said, here you go, figure it out. And fortunately, he could say, can I go home to my wife? She has a geography degree. And she helped him. But that shouldn't be the learning curve when you're a police officer or a firefighter. Keeping yourself safe in the field and negotiating that needs to be your focus, not how to work the software and map and analyze what you're looking at. Supply chain and logistics. This has always kind of been an area for geography. When I was at the University of Tennessee, if our graduating class of undergrads had 150 people in it, 75 of them were going to work for FedEx in Memphis. I mean, it's just was a huge, the distribution things, but this is increasingly now, it's not just big companies like UPS and FedEx and Amazon that are doing this. It's small companies that need to deal with supply chain logistics. And we saw that with the pandemic, how our supply chain and our logistics broke down so very quickly. Marketing, economics, increasingly using maps to understand, to do sites, site situation and site suitability analysis. And also with marketing and public history and communications, geography sort of accidentally invented a tool that increasingly is used in communications and telling these stories. A couple years ago, one of the big software companies in geography, ESRI, introduced a new tool called Story Maps. And Story Maps was supposed to be for K through 12 teachers to try and help them, because those of you that are in education, you know, we don't teach social studies. We hardly teach social studies in high school anymore. We don't teach it in elementary school anymore. And so we teach our teachers to be able to integrate social studies into reading and English and other coursework. And so ESRI came up with this story map thing to help teachers to do that. It took off like crazy. And increasingly now, my students that go out on internship, I have a lot of students that go out on internship that aren't on a geography internship, that their story map skills are what they're being marketed for. Those of you who want to see what a story map looks like, go look at the university's virtual campus tour. It's built on a story map. It's built by one of my former students on a story map, one of our former students in history and geography. Education, it's not just about using geography and integrating geography into education, but these tools in education, the spatial literacy, spatial reasoning component, allow for diversified learning and differentiated instruction and help us think about different ways to help students learn. Population health and demography, we've seen this with COVID this year. Population health and demography always demanded geographers, but increasingly all careers working in public health are going to demand geography training. Engineering, previously engineering firms had an in-house GIS technician who did their mapping. Now increasingly when I talk to engineers, they say, no, I have to be able to do my own mapping. I don't get to push that off on anybody. Energy sector, it's not by coincidence that the Department of Geography at the University of Oklahoma is in the ConocoPhillips building. Geographers are involved in energy technology. Computer science, data science, I talked about that a little bit. The government planning, we're increasingly seeing this. Dr. Taylor knows this, he's on this call, that his students who leverage their political science degree into planning degrees are increasingly being told you need to have some GIS background before you can go get into grad school, or maybe before you can do this job. And then the last one I want to talk about a little bit is where I think that Missouri Western has an opportunity to really leverage our market and make a mark and hopefully get a lot of our students employed, and that's in the sector of intelligence. So many of you may or may not be aware that National Geospatial Intelligence, which is along with the NSA, the CIA, and the the Defense Intelligence Agency, consist of the majority of the United States' intelligence gathering pieces. Their Western headquarters is in St. Louis. And this is a huge deal. It was a huge deal when the initial headquarters was built. They have since built a second campus in St. Louis, and also in the fall announced that they are going to build what's called the Moonshot Lab, which is going to be a technology incubator and an incubator for firms that want to start up in St. Louis. And so this isn't just about jobs working for NGA though. NGA has made a commitment to the city of St. Louis to turn St. Louis into what we call a GeoInt hub. So the acronym for geospatial intelligence is GeoInt. And so that has attracted hundreds of subcontractors into St. Louis who cannot keep their staffs full. This is a system. How this works in GeoInt is you come in, you work for a subcontractor. And I had a student who did this. He went to work for a subcontractor who helped him get all of his security clearances, who put him through grad school, with the goal that he would then be employed by NGA directly, which he was for about a week and a half before he was headhunted by NSA. And that's where I stop asking questions, because the FBI agent that comes to my office to do security clearances once in a while tells me not to ask questions. So, I just took a screenshot from Indeed the other day. Last week, one day, there were 125 jobs. And this was just a really vague search that I did. One of the nice things about the pandemic was that NGA put all of their things, first of all, they had to figure out how to get their employees to be able to work at home securely. And by doing that, it allowed them to also figure out a lot of mechanisms to make things, training and workshops that never would have been virtual because of security issues, virtual. And so I spent a lot of last spring and the fall attending a lot of workshops and seminars and other things with NGA. And increasingly what I see are opportunities for our students. Things that we do very well at Missouri Western are key skills that these employers want, and they want them in big numbers. And I think that we can take the things we do well and reorganize them and produce a lot of students who can get very high paying jobs. So one of the things you see repeatedly from these employers is it's great that the kids have computer science and data science skills. That's excellent, and they need those, but those are the things we can emphasize and teach, and are sometimes software specific. We need students that have the geospatial component, that can reason their way, that when they look at the data, they can figure out what they're looking at, that they can figure out what that means to the security of the United States. That if we give them a job as assuming a personality in the dark web to try and catch a drug dealer or a terrorist, that they have the cultural competencies to assume that identity so thoroughly that they don't trip themselves up and reveal themselves because they did something that only an American would do. And so these are skill sets that I think we can bring to the table when we intermix different things that we do well. I also think that there's opportunities here for Missouri Western to create partnerships. NGA loves to partner. They have a long history of partnering. They have deep partnerships with Mizzou and SLU already in Missouri, as well as Penn State and Indiana University of Pennsylvania, among others, University of Southern California. But the current commander of NGA, Admiral Sharp, wants to partner more. He just opened up a new partnership with universities, some more universities in St. Louis, looking at smaller schools, opening up to the smaller schools that are more like us. But there are no partnerships on this side of the state. The furthest west they go is to Columbia, to Mizzou. And so I think there's opportunities here for us to partner, to do workforce development and in the region and get our students really good jobs, especially with our military friendly standing. One of the things that was very clear in the fall in some of the workshops I attended was repeatedly the subcontractors said, we want to hire military personnel because they already have a good start on their security clearances. We want to hire former military, and there's this set of skills that they need to have. And so I think it would be interesting to see, taking the things we do well and our military friendly status, what we could do with that. So, but I get excited about this. So let me move on from that a little bit, because what this really is about is me asking, how do I help all of you? As I said at the beginning, this is not about me trying to grow my enrollments or my program. Increasingly with my move to biology, I want to think of myself more as, how do I help all of you? And that might be because you now know about what geography does. And so maybe you send a student for a geography minor or for the new earth and environmental science minor that is a combination of geography and geology. Maybe it's because you send your students to my courses more, and I'll talk about the courses I teach here for a minute, because I think beyond the general studies, sometimes we don't really realize what all we teach. So I teach 2 general studies courses, world geography, which is a 3-credit, general studies, social and behavioral science, that really is a baseline in geography of what geography is, and then applying it globally to understand how we fit into the world around us and how the world around us influences us. And then physical geography, which is a 4-credit natural lab science, which is much more about the physical landscape. It is about the atmosphere, the water, the land, and how we as humans interact with that. Every fall, I teach 1 of 4 regional geography courses. So US and Canada, Europe, Asia, or starting this fall, Africa. Those are kind of the same spirit as world geography, but at an upper level, taking a deeper dive into those cultures and helping students to understand them, helping to understand how those regions of the world fit into the greater world. Every other spring, I teach sustainable energy, which is a 300-level seminar class where we're constantly asking the question, what does it mean for energy to be sustainable? What technologies are sustainable? How do we move towards a more sustainable future? And the outcome of that is, or our goal in that course is moving towards designing a sustainable energy plan for the city of St. Joseph. And then I'll jump down to the bottom to my GIS course, which I teach the opposite spring from sustainable energy. That is the MAP course. That is the course where I teach them to manage data, to do data analysis, and to produce maps. I teach them to use both desktop and online tools and the industry standards that they would be expected to have in any job, and also teach them how to use the story map software in that class. And then the 2 with the stars, those are my 400 level courses that I don't get to teach as frequently as I would like, but I really feel like could fit into some programs. And if we had more demand for them, I would love to teach more often. So globalization, labor, and resources is the traditional economic geography course, looking at labor markets and labor movements, resources, not just where the resources are located, but how we move them. We deal with logistics, supply chain, and all through that lens of we're a global economy and what does that mean? And then my cultural geography course, which there's still some people who, even after I explain this course, think that what I'm going to teach in that course is about the cultures of the world. That's world geography or the regional geography courses. We do talk about components of culture like ethnicity, language, gender, race, but through the lens of place and placelessness and the narratives we construct around that. So cultural geography is actually a humanities course where we're talking about who constructs the narrative. When we talk about St. Joseph, who wrote that narrative of St. Joseph and whose narrative isn't getting told? And what happens when the narrative that's being told and the other narrative are contested, and how do we resolve those issues? And so we do a lot of reading in that class, and we talk about how do we remember battles with Native Americans, and how are those battlegrounds commemorated? Is it told through the lens of the army being victorious and pacifying the savage natives, or is it told through the lens of the Native Americans and the tribes that exist afterward? When we talk about, some of you have seen this in the news, the battle over placing Martin Luther King Jr. Drive in Kansas City, that is a whole strain of research in geography about where we place Martin Luther King drives or other roads that have people's names and what the power relationships are. And so I get into that in that class as well. So, but this is what I teach now. I am totally flexible in what I want to do, and what Dom and Shauna were kind enough to let me have this be a step off to, is I want to be able to go to different departments. I want to talk to the departments about what are your actual needs? How do I help you? What do these courses need to do to get your students prepared for their future careers? And how do I do that? So I'm going to be contacting department chairs and reaching out, but I also would love to have people reach out to me and say, you know, how can we do this? And I'm totally aware of the fact that we're all up against the same pressures of the 120 credits and our credentialing needs and all of those things, that you're not going to be able to put my whole minor into your curriculum, or even some of you are not going to be able to put even a single class into your curriculum. So then let's have the conversation about, my students really need that cultural competency skill. How can you help me get that? How can I help you all get that into your course? Or how can I help you think about it the way geographers think about it? So reach out and talk to me, email me. I'm going to answer questions here and take comments. Call me. My office is in biology. If you come in the door closest to the greenhouse, I'm the first door on the left as soon as you come in. So with that, I'll take questions or whatever.
All right. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask Dawn? Dawn, I do have one. So one of the great blessings of the geography program here on campus is that it fits very well with so many of our majors. I know that I've benefited from it as a history professor, but can you talk to me a little bit about the structure of the minor, its credit amount, the paths that students take, how they can tailor it to their major?
So the geography minors, we have a geography minor and an earth and environmental science minor, and I'll butcher the earth and environmental science minor a little bit because I don't have it in front of me and I haven't had to advise it as much. But
do you want me to pull it out?
You can, if you want to start working on that while I talk about the geography minor, okay. I will. The geography minor is 20 credits. You have to take the core. So geography is organized into 3 branches: human, physical, and technical. So you have to take the core, which is world geography is the human piece. Physical geography is obviously the physical piece. And then the 400 level GIS course is the technical piece. And then that leaves you with 6 credits. We ask you to take one regional course, which is kind of aiming towards the being aware of the world around you and that global citizen piece, and then one of the upper level courses. But because I'm one human being, we're often pretty flexible with that. And also because in the biology department, we have the applied learning component with Gold Fridays portal and the research component, we've been actively substituting out whenever possible for students who want to do internships or do research with one of the teams here in the biology department. So I have a student right now who has been working on the pond team the last 2 semesters. I have another one who's did some independent client research for the St. Joseph Library and has also done some internship work. So the geography minor is pretty flexible once you get beyond that core, both because of my schedule and because we want it to be what the students need it to be. I teach the courses in rotation so that a student can finish a geography minor in 2 years. I teach all of the courses every 2 years. So, and then the new one, the Earth and Environmental Science minor, is a combination of coursework in geography and geology. And so it has a core, thank you. It has a core with physical geology and physical geography. And so that's physical geology is Karen Coy's course. And what you're seeing there in that is you'll be comparing the geography perspective, the deep dive, the where component and how the where matters versus the geology component, which is a deep dive through history and how time impacts what we understand about the physical shape of the earth. And then you also in that core take meteorology to add to your atmospheric component. And then at the remaining credits, you take a choice of 2, and this gives you the opportunity, if you're more interested in kind of Dr. Coy's side, you might take paleontology. If you want that mapping component, you can take GIS with me. The sustainable energy course is there. Human ecology, which is an option in the geography minor as well, is there. That's really the human environment interaction piece of geography, and it's a nice dovetail with biology. Essentially, where my physical geography class ends, Dr. Jedlicka picks up in the human ecology class.
And just so you know, Dr. Drake, I was not able to find this on the webpage that has all of the major minor forms by discipline. So if you want to send a nudge, I found this on biology's website.
Okay. I know that we're also working on creating an actual geosciences page on the biology website that has more information about both minors and other things that we do.
Excellent. I just need to find stop share. Okay, there we go. All right, any other questions for Dawn? I do have one more.
Yep.
Can you speak a little more about the connection between law enforcement and because that was tops on your list in terms of figuring out how to manage the area, but more specifically, since we have a growing law enforcement and perhaps even military science programs here on campus, how geography can dovetail nicely with that, please.
So increasingly, oh, I might even be able to find this fast enough. Increasingly, law enforcement and criminology do not simply look at a list of crimes and sorry, I want to share this. Look at a list of crimes and just say, well, these are our problems. They look at a list of crimes in space and use that to deploy resources. And so those of you that aren't familiar with this is the City of St. Joseph's community crime map. And you can do all kinds of different things. This is available to the public, but police officers are going to have a much more detailed version of this in their car. And so that they're going to be asked to put their police reports on this map. And so they need to know how to work the software, but they also need to know how to analyze things through space and look for patterns. And in some cases, if they're becoming up in the ranks in more detective type positions, are going to be asked to make decisions using these maps. And where do we put police force? Where do we think the next crime is going to happen? Those types of things.
Very cool. I mean, you look at these maps of, I just remember it used to be called Family Watchdog, but it was where they would find sexual register offenders on maps. And back when I lived in Connecticut, we knew the streets because of those maps. And then so you could do increased surveillance patrolling based on those registries. So, and also redirect bus routes.
Yes.
So.
And
excellent.
This
Thank
is
you.
how the city of St. Joseph, those of you that are familiar, the city of St. Joseph has what's called surge force that comes on at from midnight to 3 a.m. There's an increased number of officers on foot patrol, and how they decide where they go every night is primarily based on this map.
Oh, very cool. Excellent. All right, other questions? Ed.
I have two things. Sorry, I'm waiting for Dawn for eyes. Two things. Actually, one is just, for those of you who haven't worked very much with Dawn, she's really to be complimented on the work she does. I've done a lot of work with her. She was a key force in helping our students take a trip to Portland. And one of the things they did was mental mapping, which was an amazing exercise for these students who, when they went to the city for the first time, did a mental map about what they expected. And then they did another one about what they learned about the city, trying to gauge how their expectations changed as they interacted with the map. So again, if you have the opportunity to work with her directly, you really should, because she's phenomenal. And she is pretty much a kick-ass organizer, which for someone like me is amazing. But my question is, the pain for me always at this point in my life is the painful element in the room is that I no longer have a program. So my question is, worst case scenario, if our programs are not restored or something else doesn't come in place, what are ways that you can suggest for how we can connect our students in our general education courses in an applied learning way to some of the geographical concepts or ideas that you want to have in place? So again, if we just talk about American government straight up, or like in my mind, I can be like, oh, we could maybe, like, let me phrase it like this. Is it possible to do like, all right, let's do a geographic exercise on gerrymandering? Is that something that we can create? Is that something that we have the skills to do, tools to do?
Yes. So what I've learned in doing Gold Friday's portal, and what I was going to open something, but let me just go back to this. Sorry. What I've learned in doing applied learning and being in the biology department, and also learned from the fact that right at the moment we can only teach GIS every other spring, and a lot of my students are seniors when they take it, and they turn around and they graduate, and I don't have them to do research, is that we can teach a certain amount of skills that we need to, and they don't need a full semester class to get a certain amount of skills. So I have a research student who is in my GIS class this semester, but I was able to give him enough basic training last semester that he started drawing. He's doing land use and land cover around the ponds on campus, but he learned how in the GIS to actually make his own data, which is actually a somewhat advanced skill, but because we simplified it and I gave him a certain set of tasks, he was able to do it. And so with the gerrymandering thing, first of all, what I will say with the gerrymandering thing is the American Association of Geographers just rolled out a gerrymandering institute this week that has all kinds of pre-built web tools. So we don't even have to build anything. I thought I tagged you on that post, but I may not have. I will send the stuff to you because there's a whole bunch of pre-built activities in there, some of which are for K-12, but there's also a lot of college stuff in there. There is also one of the things about geography. So when I say that I tend to stomp all over all of your disciplines, what geographers will say about that is you all been stomping all over us for about the last 10 years or so, and act like, and not any of you in particular, but it feels like all these other disciplines are like, hey, did you know you could put it on a map? Yeah, I did know I could put it on a map. Thank you. And so that was a long way around and a snarky way around to say that there are a tremendous amount of very intuitive web tools for mapping that don't require you to have GIS skills, but would instill the same spatial literacy, spatial interpretation type skills in the students.
So do you have ideas for, I mean, I'm just picking your brain, like in a history 140 class, early American history?
Well, Dr.
This is-
DeBrinket and I are just going to go around mapping shipwrecks.
I just thought you were going to teach him north and south. No, that's Dr. Hart.
Dr. DeBrinket told me when he was interviewed that terrain mattered to the American Revolution. So that was how he was going to work with geography.
I think that was a different candidate. I'm pretty sure, because we wouldn't have hired that guy.
So no, there are a lot of different ways that we can incorporate geography in and bring in some of those skill sets. And some of those skill sets are lean. So the data management stuff very much is part of history too. We just don't tend to think of it that way.
Right.
So all of those students who I said got jobs in data management, yes, all three of them are history majors. And it was also an ability to think through those things. They could manipulate the spreadsheet because of GIS, but some of that data processing came from their history training as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
One quick practical question. Do students need to be geography or earth science or biology minors to take your upper level specialization classes? Since GIS fits in so many different areas. And
GIS has no prereqs on it other than junior standing, but I take sophomores into as long as their advisor thinks they can handle it.
Just want to make sure that was on the record, because I know
no, you're right. I forgot.
CIS folks would want
I have been increasingly stripping my prereqs away. So GIS only has junior standing on it. And that was actually UGCC's mandate because it's a 400 level course.
Okay.
The regional courses, which are 300 level, have no prereqs on them. Sustainable energy, if it does have a prereq on it, I think it has a prereq of any geography course or Bio 207, but we will waive it. And I think I've been intending to get rid of that prereq. And then the 400 levels tend to have prereqs on them. I know for cultural, it's just English because it's a very writing intensive course.
Okay.
As a writing and reading intensive course. Globalization, labor and resources, I think it's any geography course or any econ course. But again, with an advisor recommendation, I would be comfortable putting people in there. And we do waive it occasionally for business students. So although many of them have econ, so.
Okay, well, thank you.
Hey, Don, I don't know if you've
Yes.
had any contact with anybody in math, but we're getting ready to start a data science minor. I
Yes.
wouldn't be teaching any of the classes, but I know you were going to reach out to the department, so.
Yes, well, you might know this, my student who chases the money around is Jeff's daughter.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you're probably up on all of the.
Well, I haven't been, but I need to touch base both in terms of the data science part, because I was vaguely aware that you guys were doing that, and also with computer science for the intelligence type stuff.
Right.
Because my student who works for the NSA actually is a computer science alum with a geography minor.
Okay, very good. Thank you
Thank you.
for the talk.
Thank you for coming.
If there aren't any other questions, why don't we draw this to close? If anybody has any further questions, follow-ups, or comments, please reach out to Dr. Drake. We are going to be posting this on the CTL website and our YouTube page. I hope to have it up by tonight, if not sometime this weekend. So spread the word for anybody who might be interested. I'll try to spread the word myself on our social medias. And then just as a plug for future programming, in 2 weeks from today at 1 o'clock, the next CTL workshop is going to be with Jake Kelly from Tech Services, who is going to be offering part 1 of Google Apps. There's been a popular demand by both staff and faculty. Hey, we have all of these apps on our computers. What can we do with them? I even learned some things today that I thought I should have known already. So join us in 2 weeks on the 19th. And then 2 weeks after that, he'll do part 2 for other apps that he doesn't cover. If any of you ever have any ideas for workshops or things that you'd like to see on the CTL webpage, please reach out to Shauna or myself, or email us at ctl@missouriwestern.edu. www.ccc.edu. And with that, everybody, please have a wonderful, very warm weekend. And I will hopefully see you at the next workshop. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you all.